but we are pulling together those resources in one place to the extent we can to fuse that talent and develop a better exponential approach and ROIs, hopefully, for everyone involved. So it's neutral space. We figure we got to have neutral space. We in the government tend to want to, well, not necessarily want to, but have to classify things prematurely. When we put you in government space, everything becomes classified at a certain level, and the tendency is that it gets even higher classified as you continue in that space. What we recognize in putting these partnerships together is if it's your information, you bring it voluntarily, it's your information. And we want to hold off over-classifying that information, which tends to stifle the flow and the networking and the partnerships as long as we can. And make it a two-way exchange. You know, we recognize criticism that's out there that, hey, one-way street. You ask for it, we give it to you, and never hear back from you. We realize that we need to the extent possible, give back information, and this environment allows us to do that much more effectively than we could in the past. We also know that we need to leverage your analytical capability and your intelligence strengths, and we want you to leverage us. To the extent law enforcement is part of your solution, and we hope it is, we want you to be able to tap into us to find out how does this case get worked, how does it get referred to the international community if that's where it goes, how do we bring other stakeholders into the mix to help advance this, and how do we collectively go after this proactively? Because cybercrime moves so fast, we realize we have to be out of the box very quickly. We have to develop aggressive techniques to identify, shut down, maybe make some undercover transactions, buys to follow the money or create a money trail. How do we do that, and how do we team up and use each other's resources to make that happen? This is sort of a simplified process flow of the input versus the output, but obviously it's key industry subject matter experts, of which you are, many of them, law enforcement, academia, and our outputs are, obviously, we want to develop targeted investigations. We want to achieve impact. We'll talk a little bit more about what impact is. Lessons learned. You know, this is one of these things you have to, as I said, keep reinventing yourself, figure out what's working, what's not, and let's try to repeat the good and stop doing those things that are unproductive. But in cyber, it's not just arresting the bad guys and shutting down their networks, but it's a constant education process as well. You know, the consumers out there who are the major part of the victims, the small to medium to large companies whose resources are being used to carry out or expand these crimes are very significant for us to help and for us to team up on alerting individuals to the new and evolving schemes and put together some proactive options and joint training if we can. This slide, a little bit busy, but essentially it's just meant to show that we've got a lot of different resources that plug into this project. We have physical people located here, but we have a lot more information that comes in through the collaborations we have on different initiatives that are set up. And we do have the ability to tap into secure law enforcement databases as needed, but as you can see, that piece of it is really a relatively small piece of the space and not meant to, and purposely so that it doesn't inhibit the flow of information and the collaboration that we can achieve. As I said earlier, we have to be sensitive to the definitions. We have to be sensitive to being drawn into those stovepipes that are so comfortable sometimes for us in government and recognize what are the overlaps. How do the bad guys describe themselves? You know, what are the fundamental objectives and definitions of the problem? This is another illustration to show you how we've sort of evolved our approach, recognizing that at IC3, we get about 22,000 complaints in a month from consumers. Some of those are, and a lot of those are overlapping. The same scam being spammed out to 10,000 people. We may get 500 of those that report that same scheme. So that's not necessarily indicative of 22,000 new crimes. But the consumers, and we found this, the frustration was that we get a $200 complaint from a consumer. They want something done, as I would too. If we can't aggregate that into an actionable case, if we can't build that to something that's 10,000, 100,000, something that's a larger case for law enforcement and prosecutors to go after, we're going to have a difficult time getting action taken, and that positive feedback's not going to come. As we started to realize that industry has so much data, we realized it obviously is going to overlap with that consumer data. Consumer logs on through their ISP, goes to an auction site, goes to a third-party pay site, or buys some merchandise from an online merchant. They may have visited 4 or 5 different entities who are major stakeholders along the way, and they may have actually reported that problem to them as well. So we found in talking to our key partners in industry that was happening in a lot of cases. So we can take a lot more information from industry. We can use that to build an investigation a lot quicker, and we can also make sure that you're being aware that something that looks like spam or a spoof website. It may involve you know, an intrusion on the front end. It may end up being identity theft on the back end. It may involve international reshipping and money laundering as we follow the case forward. But it's important for us to realize the total picture of what that investigation is, as opposed to getting stuck with within the separate pipes. This illustration is meant to show industry the benefits of these collaborative projects that we put together. Both IC3 and the NCFTA are public-private alliances where we purposely define those partnerships as such so that we can bring industry and academia into the setting to work with us. And we work on different initiatives with different partners. We may be working on an identity theft initiative with the ISP community, a reshipping initiative with the merchant community, or some other initiative with some of the other major stakeholders. Information that comes into these projects actually now can be shared with the different members of those teams. So something that, you know, Citibank sees over here may not be apparent to eBay and PayPal on this end, or to Microsoft or AOL over here. By connecting to this partnership with us, they can get the benefit of that information and get the better picture of what the threat is, or what the misuse of their product or their brand is, and take appropriate action. So we try to set this up so that we can, you know, benefit those team members from being part of this collaboration. And obviously, we get the benefit of that cross-connecting of data that enables us to build the cases faster and get a more effective referral out to law enforcement. As I said early on, we define a threat through industry to try to take a manageable bite of the apple. And the nature of the threat, as industry reports to us and our own information tells us, it's complex and getting more sophisticated all the time. It's increasingly international. Organized criminal groups would have distinct roles, and we'll talk about that. Social engineering is a common theme, and that's probably not going to change. Operation Relief was one of the first joint initiatives we did with industry, and we've learned from each of these as we've gone forward. We went to a group of industry merchants, you know, actually prior to 2001, and then carried that relationship on. But we were at a conference much like this, but much smaller, and said, hey, we want to help. We want to be your buddy. We want to team up with you to go after cybercrime. And they said, we've heard that before. We're going to challenge you. We're getting killed in West Africa. You go to West Africa and figure out how to help us, and here's what we're being beat on. It's reshipping. And we said, okay, what's reshipping? He said, well, you know, the West Africans used to come in directly from West Africa, sign in, and try to get us to ship our merchandise using a stolen, compromised credit card. We got wise to that, stopped accepting IP traffic from West Africa. They started to bounce their traffic from different open proxies and other resources to make it look like they're coming in from somewhere else. So we stopped shipping to West Africa. Then they realized that was our, you know, evolution, so they decided they needed to recruit people in the United States to be their domestic ship points. So we see that merchant is not coming from, or that customer is not coming from out of the country, or the shipment appears to be domestic. The merchants had dropped their guard a little bit, let that merchandise ship, only to find 2 days later that it in fact was a bogus payment instrument, and it was shipped internationally. Well, partnering with industry and going to meet with them and talk to them and see the people that were working this on their behalf, I got to know that and got to see firsthand that they're real life people looking at their websites every day. They're looking at anomalies and seeing things that are unusual that we would never see. So another light bulb goes off. Hey, you guys are really a valuable partner with us, and not just, you know, we should not be saying, give me all this information, because the reality is, how are we going to process it? We don't have all the talented people that you have to understand why this is important and why it's significant. For instance, one of the analysts brought me over to the terminal and said, hey, look at this. This guy's committing a crime, and I know it's a crime. And I said, what is he doing? He said, we just bought 12 pairs of parachute pants, all the same size, and nobody shops like that. So, all right. So we looked further and found out that the email account was similar to one they had seen earlier, in which a bogus credit card was used. There was a naming configuration that was similar. And they drilled down further and found there were other commonalities in the transactions that helped them aggregate and build this case faster. So we said, wow, you guys are really good at this. Are you talking to these other companies? And we found out, yep, they were already talking. They'd already broken down the barriers and realized that they needed to network and work together to aggregate these cases or these incidents to a higher level. So really, we just said, hey, if you can give us this data and format it in a way that helps us digest it faster, that would be really great. So we built on that partnership. This slide is just an example of the number of reshippers that were identified in a very short period of time that we otherwise would not have seen. Now, each one of these people may not, or organizations or individuals are represented by the green dots, may not be criminally culpable. They may have been duped into the scheme, but it's an intelligence opportunity for us. It gives us a good scope of the problem that we didn't know about, so it helps us understand how important industry is to the mix. But it also lets us identify some of the early warning signs or early triggers that we can look at to better identify cybercrime quicker. through these scenarios and talking to these people that were recruited, some of them were making a lot of money, some of them really were criminally culpable, and there were actually charges brought. But we found that they were recruited through Pro Flowers and some of the other online, flower and candy organizations. And they were being wooed for months by this person they thought was going to be their long-lost love. So we found out, working with Pro Flowers and some of those folks who were being scammed as well, that there were some early warning signs that we could see there. We also found that it was the resume sites that were being used. People thought they were signing up for a legitimate work-at-home scheme, and they were being duped. So working with Monster and Career Builders and others, we were able to identify additional early warning signs in these schemes that helped us get out of the box much more quickly on this crime problem. As industry said, we want your help, but you're going to have to make this work. And we took our Make It Personal motto and went on the road and actually went and got to know the people in Nigeria and Ghana and got to understand what their inhibitors were in going after cybercrime and what they needed to see, how they needed it packaged. Because when we go to the international community and say, I got a phishing case here we want you to help with, and you say, what the heck is phishing? It's not even a crime. We don't even know what it is, but it's not a crime in our country. Now, if you make it look like organized crime or money laundering or some of the other things that it actually could be, and in many cases is, you get their attention. So we realized we had to conform more to what they needed to see, and they needed some training and some help on how to work this. But because we went over and made it personal, we actually today can get a lot more things done. We're getting controlled deliveries, we're getting arrests, we're getting search and seizures done much more quickly than we did in the past. So this Make It Personal motto has actually translated into very good success and high impact in that country. And we've taken that to other countries as well. Recognizing that if you have a new plan and a new initiative, you got to get people to take ownership in it. This is just to show you that there are specific people that we have assigned to build the relationships with the different stakeholders out there. So there is one or two people or a team of people that are assigned to make sure that whatever we're doing with you today, it's better tomorrow. We find a way to make that information exchange and the mutual return on investments more productive for both. So again, being sensitive to the definitions. I like to tell people is beware the trees. Be careful of being sucked into the forest. And as Jeff said at the beginning, I'm really more the 30,000 foot person. I try to keep pushing people back out and say, wait a minute, you're saying it's this, but it might also be this and this. So let's continue to be sensitive to what the broader nature of the problem is so that we can define a better impact to that problem. In doing that, we look at these individuals. Who are these guys? Who are the people out there that are conducting the crimes that we're interested in going after? They're not just the script kiddies anymore, as you know. These are people that are making a lot of money now today. And there's no shortage of these humorous cartoons, but it's the carding forums that are out there that many of you are aware of or have been in or heard about. But the groups that interact in these forums, they're highly organized in their networks. They consist of specialized cells for different functions. They utilize forums such as CardaPro, ACA, Shadow Crew, and the others constantly, and they market for things bought or sold regularly. Now they conduct network intrusions on merchant processors. They use malware and viruses to help expand the scope of the scheme. Spam and phishing are a big part of it, and exploits that are distributed through those techniques include the major stakeholders and financial services. Targeting software piracy and pharmaceuticals are also on the rise out there. Auction and escrow fraud continue to be part of the priorities that we look at, as well as a number of other things that we'll touch on shortly. A realization for a number of us out there that spam and cybercrime is really all about the money came when we were studying the SoBig.F virus from 2003. In a single day, this virus expanded extremely rapidly across the internet and compromised thousands or millions of hosts.